may we start the work of the General Committee on Political Affairs and Security, the so-called first committee of our OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. I welcome all participants. I think a couple will still enter the room in the coming minutes, but since we have a quite long list of speakers, it's better we start immediately without losing time. The first observation concerning, the first decision to be taken is to adopt the draft agenda of this meeting, which has been circulated. Are there any objections?
Yes.
No objections. I heard there was an objection from the rapporteur, so I was suddenly very worried. But there is no objection, so we adopt the agenda. I will now consider this as adopted. It is a pleasure for me, as a chairman of the Committee on Political Affairs and Security, to welcome you to this meeting. I would also like to welcome Mr. Christian Vigenin from Bulgaria as the rapporteur of the committee. You will be aware that we do not have a committee vice chair at the moment, since Mr. Guglielmo Picchi from Italy was recently appointed as Deputy Foreign Minister in the Italian government. We listened to him this morning. The committee is staffed by Deputy Secretary General Gustavo Pallares, a clerk from the United Kingdom House of Commons, Stephen McGuinness, advisor Loic Poulain, and research fellow Juliana Lindell. Welcome to all of them. First of all, by welcoming you, I remember that we had a promise. We made a promise in Vienna during the the winter meeting. We had the promise that we would circulate among the members of the committee a short organizational chart and list of acronyms which are usually used in our discussions to facilitate the understanding of what we are saying. I think you have seen that this is available as outside of the room, the chart, so you can see all the single elements and bodies and the institutions of our structure. It's quite complex, but you find your way when you look between the decision-making bodies, executive structures, OSCE in the fields, OSCE-related bodies, and we know how our Parliamentary Assembly is working. There is also an updated list of acronyms, which is abbreviations and acronyms, which is, I think, sometimes really important to have in order to understand about what we are speaking. Let's, first of all, introduce our debate with the following remark. We meet, dear colleagues, in difficult times. I don't know if there were ever easy times, but for sure, since World War II and also since the creation of OSCE, the present situation is one of the more complex we have seen. Peace is under threat and security as well. And changes happen very rapidly, so it's sometimes difficult for our organization and for our Parliamentary Assembly to follow and so even to anticipate some of the changes we are experiencing. This is certainly a difficulty for our work, but a danger as such for peace and security. We know the problem of protracted conflicts. We have a lot of work to do, but no mediation seems to succeed. A few steps, maybe small steps, we will discuss today. There are new threats, of course, terrorism, cyber war, the lack of political and democratic control on private and security and intelligence forces, the requested rearmament from countries. If all the requests for rearmament would be met, there will be a lot of billions to spend for weapons. That is good for this industry, but maybe a bit less good for the security on our continent and all over the world. There is lack of confidence and predictability in the international situation and in the international organizations. There is a lot of credibility of multilateral cooperation as such, and there are attempts to replace these with unilateral acts or at best bilateral agreements, which may be helpful but are unstable and don't enjoy broad support and commitment of the international community. What can the OSCE do in this situation? This morning we heard from Speaker Mr. Schäuble that the OSCE remains unverzichtbar, so indispensable. But is it really so? Are we really in the situation to say we are indispensable for the peace and security in Europe and outside Europe? Parliamentary Assembly is working well. We know, and we had also the impression over the last meetings and yesterday even in the Standing Committee that the atmosphere, the working atmosphere, the willingness of cooperate and understand each other is there. The ministerial level seems anyhow to be somehow frozen. And this includes important bodies like Forum for Security and Cooperation, the Center for Prevention of Conflicts, the Structured Dialogue, and so on. So I would like to thank and underline the excellent report of our rapporteur, Christian Vigenin, who recalls the importance, the aims, the goals of all these bodies in the OSCE structure. The questions for us parliamentarians are the following. How can we support the positive trend we feel inside the Parliamentary Assembly and continue working in that sense? Second, how can we make sure that we remain a place for dialogue, understanding, cooperation, explanation, and not just for protracted conflict at political level, protracting what is happening in the fields in the different conflicts. And finally, most important, how can we transmit our positive spirit to the ministerial level? One answer was given this morning by Guglielmo Picchi. You remember this maybe. Pass less resolutions, but more significant. Well, it's difficult because everyone believes his own item is the most significant one. So it belongs to parliamentarianism that there are different ideas on what is really important and less important. But the attempt is worth trying it. And I would like, once again, to say not only the report of Christian Vigenin, but also the draft resolution is such a significant document, and we will discuss it, we will have amendments on it, but maybe we can concentrate on this document a number of positions which characterize the Parliamentary Assembly and can be maybe heard by the ministerial level. Finally, I would like to add a couple of other recommendations myself. It's good to make use of the documents, of our documents, resolutions, supplementary items, for addressing general problems and proposing constructive solutions for all. It's less good to use them, to this instrument just for finger pointing at the one or the other country, protracting, as I said, conflicts instead of looking for dialogue. Our work shall consist in searching the ways for mediation. We know it's never easy to reach mediation, in particular when the interested parties have no interest in a mediation or in a result of a mediation. But for us, it remains the goal of this assembly to work for our common principles, not to use the principles for fighting against each other. And finally, I believe we shall be creative and innovative in our working methods. General committees, supplementary items and resolutions, electoral observations and monitoring missions are all okay. But if we look over to the recent developments in our Parliamentary Assembly, we see that it is possible to develop new and targeted instruments, like, for instance, the ad hoc committees, the successful ad hoc committees on migration and and counterterrorism are there to make an example. The working groups seminars like the Silk Road Support Group or the Leinsweiler seminars, also such instruments can flourish inside the Parliamentary Assembly and be very helpful. And finally, maybe listening to all the discussions on this issue, one day we may be led to create an ad hoc committee on cybersecurity and democratic control of intelligence, and not only of private and public security forces. This as introductory remark. Thank you very much for being now almost complete in the room, so we can go ahead. Before we continue, anyone speaking from a prepared text should hand that text to the Secretariat in advance. This is a very important help for the interpreters and makes our meetings more productive and efficient. So if you have text, please give a copy of them to the Secretariat for the transmission to the interpreters. May I also remember that we have 25 amendments which will be tabled, so we will have a lot of work in that part. But today we look forward to terminate the general debate after introduction of our rapporteur. And also here we have a number of interventions. How many have we? 16. 16 speakers announced, and I unfortunately have to tell you that we close the list of speakers because with 16 it is already a lot for today, and we will give 3 minutes each speaker for his intervention. So if you prepare the speech of 10 minutes, please make use of the next minutes and shorten it to 3 minutes. Finally, may I remember the colleagues that the election of committee officers for the 28th annual session of the Assembly will take place during the committee's final session, which is likely to take place on Tuesday, the 10th of July at 9 o'clock. And you know that the officers of the committee are a president, a vice president, and a rapporteur. Nomination for candidates for election should be handed to the table office no later than 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. The committee is scheduled to meet 4 times during this session. Our first task is the report and draft resolution prepared by our rapporteur, Mr. Vigenin, on the theme of this year's annual session, implementing OSCE commitments, the role of parliaments. In addition to this report and draft resolution, we have been asked by the Standing Committee to debate and consider 5 supplementary items covering the following issues: draft resolution on preventing and countering terrorism, violent extremism and radicalization that leads to terrorism, proposed by Makis Voridis from Greece. Second, draft resolution on 10 years after the August 2008 war in Georgia, proposed by Mrs. Katsarava from Georgia. Third, draft resolution on strengthening the visibility of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly within the national parliaments and of participating states, proposed by Mrs. Doris Barnett from Germany. Fourth, draft resolution on strengthening the OSCE's approach to supporting security sector governance and reform in participating states, proposed by Mrs. Kinner-Nellen, head of the Swiss delegation. Fifth, draft resolution on reaffirming the commitment to and guarantees of the effective operation of the OSCE, proposed by Mrs. Bellens from Belgium. 17 amendments have been tabled to these supplementary items, which are also available in the usual way. We will consider the supplementary items when our main business on the draft resolution is concluded. Now, I would like to give the floor to our rapporteur, Mr. Christian Vigenin from Bulgaria, who has worked very hard to present a good draft report and draft resolution as a basis for our work. It would assist me greatly if any member but this is already the list of speakers being closed. I don't have to ask you anything more. Thank you very much for listening to me and my initial consideration, and now we listen to the more substantial part of this afternoon, which is the report of Christian Vigenin. You have the floor.
Danke, Herr Vorsitzender Lombardi, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Ich möchte mich zuerst bei der deutschen Delegation für die ausgezeichnete Organisation dieses Treffens bedanken. Wir hatten einen erfolgreichen Start heute, das hoffentlich auch gute Ergebnisse mit uns bringt. Das war für unsere Gastgeber, now in English. Within the framework of the... Danke.
Shame on me, I forgot it.
I have to secure support of my report. Now, within the framework work of this year's annual session team, implementing OSCE commitments, the role of parliaments, my report and draft resolution outline commitments and means of implementation in the first dimension of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly's work, and further explore central security issues affecting the OSCE region today. With deepening distrust, dividing East and West, the OSCE is experiencing a time of heightened tensions not seen since the Cold War. The level of dialogue and trust across the area spanning the 57 participating states of the OSCE has reached historic lows, which some might call a failure of multilateral organizations for falling short of managing the challenges we face. In light of these developments and the declining trust throughout the OSCE region, it is now more than ever of greatest importance for multilateral organizations to bridge divides and enable dialogue between states and their parliaments and civil societies in security matters. The Parliamentary Assembly sets out to facilitate and promote greater involvement in the OSCE by national parliaments and to assess the implementation of OSCE objectives by the participating states. Commitments in the political-military sphere of the OSCE's work are anchored in agreements such as the Vienna document, the OSCE document on small arms and light weapons, and the Code of Conduct on political-military aspects of security. These agreements are deepened and expressed by a set of confidence and security-building measures which aim to ensure the exchange of military information, limitation of levels of military equipment, as well as other activities which may increase transparency and reliability. Implementation of OSCE commitments in the political-military dimension is supported and assessed through various means. Channels such as the Forum for Security Cooperation, the Conflict Prevention Center, but also processes such as the structured dialogue and security sector reform more broadly are of the greatest importance in facilitating communication in the field of political and military affairs and in enhancing dialogue and cooperation to diffuse potential conflicts. In my report, I go into some detail on the theoretical framework surrounding the political-military sphere of the OSCE's work, including its core documents which lay the grounds for essential activities such as information sharing and dialogue. I will now briefly outline the issues which are addressed in the report and the resolution. An issue of central importance to the OSCE and the First Committee is counterterrorism. The increasing threat to domestic security posed by radicalization of mainly young people, which can result in terrorism, represents an imminent risk to the entire OSCE area. Considering this transnational threat, the OSCE promotes a cooperative and coordinated approach to countering terrorism at all levels, including coordination among national authorities, states, and relevant international and regional organizations. The Ad Hoc Committee on Countering Terrorism, CCT, which was established by the Standing Committee at the 26th Annual Session in Minsk, has an important function in this regard, as it sets out to assess terrorism trends in the OSCE region, to identify priority areas of engagement for the Parliamentary Assembly, aiming to advance its efforts in the field of countering terrorism. Another central concern for OSCE participating states today relates to cybersecurity issues. Central risks posed by cyber attacks are related to countries' critical infrastructure, such as water supply systems, power grids, transport infrastructure, the attack on which can seriously undermine a state's national security. A key focus of the OSCE is therefore on the development of confidence-building measures between states to reduce the risk of conflict stemming from the use of information and communication technologies. Another issue dominating our current political discourse is the heightened tension surrounding the development of nuclear capabilities of states. The OSCE region is increasingly affected by a decline of confidence in and adherence to nuclear non-proliferation agreements, as support for commitments to nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament have lessened on a global scale. Given these circumstances, the importance of implementing non-proliferation treaties such as the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1540 on preventing the proliferation of nuclear weapons are of greatest importance and fully supported by the OSCE. This also applies to the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, of which all OSCE states are signatories. The July 2017 Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the first legally binding international agreement to comprehensively prohibit nuclear weapons, is also an important step towards a safer, nuclear-free world. Protracted conflicts in the OSCE region remain a priority in the work of the organization. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, the Transnistrian conflict, and the conflict in Georgia are all frozen or protracted conflicts on the territory of the former USSR, for which the OSCE has developed tools and forms to facilitate dialogue and peaceful communication between parties. The crisis in and around Ukraine is a core issue for the OSCE, as it is dedicated to ensuring respect for territorial integrity of Ukraine. I have to remind you that the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly has previously stated in its resolutions that, I quote, "The annexation of the Crimean Peninsula by the Russian Federation was illegal and illegitimate. At the same time, the Assembly continues to provide opportunities for political dialogue between the parties concerned and to promote a diplomatic resolution to the crisis. The implementation of all the provisions of the Minsk II agreement by all sides remains the key for a comprehensive peace agreement in the Donbass. Despite setbacks, the goals set forth in these agreements are still achievable and remain the best path forward for Ukraine and the region." In conclusion, and in light of this year's annual session theme, I repeat, implementing OSCE commitments, the role of parliaments, it is important to highlight that the OSCE's effectiveness in ensuring security and cooperation can only be achieved with the support of participating states and their national parliaments. In order to face the varied and complex set of developments and conflicts with which the OSCE is confronted today, and to ensure peace and cooperation in our region, we must therefore recall and implement the core agreements to which we as participating states have committed. I am very thankful to all of you who submitted amendments, and I'm sure that they will make our resolution more relevant, more comprehensive. There are only few of them which I will hesitate to support because they may change the spirit of the resolution if adopted. However, it is you who decide. I, with the decisive help by the Secretariat and especially Gustavo Payares, have presented a draft. It is up to you to modify and adopt it in a way which would reflect better the views of the majority here. I expect a very fruitful debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Christian Vigenin. The report is exactly as we said, compact and comprehensive one, which is a very good introduction for our debate. The floor is now open for debate. The time limit for speeches is 3 minutes. If we see that it becomes too long, we will reduce the time limit. But so, in order to be, how do you say? In order to be correct towards the next speakers, please maintain the time frame, because if not, we will punish some other speakers, which is not correct. We start giving, and at the end, if we have enough time, I would give Christian Vigenin the time for some minutes for answering also the questions put in the general debate. We start giving the floor to Mr. Dean Allison from, no? I have the pleasure to give the floor to my predecessor as president of this committee, Senator Roger Wicker, United States.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for starting us off so well. I want to congratulate Christian, our new rapporteur, for getting off to a good start. He's put together a great report and a great resolution. I would point out to my colleagues, with approval, that the resolution before you in paragraph 21 urges renewed commitment of our OSCE members to the provisions of the Helsinki Final Act. And as the rapporteur mentioned with respect to the situation in Ukraine, there is a member of this Parliamentary Assembly who has not adhered to the provisions of the Helsinki Final Act in a number of respects with regard to the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Paragraph 32 of the proposed document reconfirms the OSCE's previous positions on the crisis in and around Ukraine. Our distinguished rapporteur pointed out to the delegates that this remains a core issue for this committee and for the OSCE, and that in previous resolutions and proclamations, this committee and this Parliamentary Assembly has pointed out emphatically that the actions of the Russian leadership with regard to the territory of Ukraine are, as the rapporteur said, illegal and illegitimate. These are not the words, though, only of the rapporteur. These are not the words only of this delegate from the United States. But the previous proclamations that this document reaffirms are that, at least in these and other regards, Russia has breached its commitment to refrain from violating the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of other signatory states, to respect other states' right to choose their own security alliances, and to refrain from the threat or use of force against other states. This is not a civil war that's going on in the Donbass of Ukraine. This is what we have said in previous resolutions and what this document reaffirms. I wish I didn't have to say it. I don't mean to harp on it, but this resolution does reaffirm the strong statements we have made. I wish it were not so. I call on parties that were signatory to the Helsinki Final Act to abide by those commitments, and I thank the chair for recognizing me and for your indulgence.
Thank you very much, Senator Wicker, and we continue with Mrs. Anat Berko from Israel.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, first I would like to thank Germany for its hospitality. I would like to focus my remarks today on cyber defense. As the head of the subcommittee for cyber defense in the Knesset, Israel's parliament, I urge us all to oversee national readiness for cyber defense and legislation on cyber issues. This forum has identified the danger stemming from cyber threats as early as 2008 in its Astana Declaration, and over the year, the OSCE has shown its commitment in recognition of cyber threats up to the last year's declaration in Minsk. Today, with global jihad and other forms of terrorism, cyberspace is also a global phenomenon. characterized by having no boundaries. The entire world is interconnected via communication infrastructure where one damage of a malware can affect the entire system of a state. We see very sophisticated level of capacity of terror organization, and we must cooperate to secure our critical infrastructure such as water, electricity, and public transportation. Threats of cyberspace are also seen in the possible abuse of databases such as biometric one. Cyberterrorism is dangerous in winning hearts and minds as a tool to tilt election process. Doubting results of election could be disaster in democratic regime, as it could be used as a psychological warfare. We usually talk about lone wolf terrorists, but think about the lone wolf hacker. He can cause collateral damage to a state or even several nations. Not to mention the involvement of terror organizations such as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, or Hezbollah. Israel is very much aware of this and advanced in the field of cybersecurity, basically because of the Prime Minister's vision. Israel will be happy to cooperate in the cyber defense domain with this forum. Thank you.
And we continue with Mrs. Margareta Söderfeld, Sweden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I do first want to congratulate the rapporteur, Mr. Virginin, for his report and draft resolution. My contribution to this debate is two. The first one I would like to say is it's now almost 4.5 years since the Russian aggression on Ukraine started. And in the European Union, there is not the term about the crisis in and around Ukraine. We are talking about Russian aggression, and that's what it is. I believe it's very important that we also use the correct term. I say this because when it's period like this, with a lot of tension, a lot of insecurity, it's also important that we dare to call things with their real name, what it's about. My second thing I would like to take the opportunity to mention here is the importance of the fight against corruption. Corruption is not only a financial issue, it's an issue for security, it's an issue for reliability, for democracy, and I think we should put much more effort to defeat corruption. We could do a lot as OSCE parliamentarians assembly if we really want to defeat corruption. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mrs. Söderfeld. Now the floor is to Mr. Laurinas Kasčiūnas from Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you for the draft of the report. We have here, of course, one very important part about protracted conflicts and about what's happening in Georgia. But I will add a little bit something in my short speech. So this year marks 10 years after the war have passed, but Russia has still not implemented the 6-point peace plan. The Georgian regions of Abkhazia and Tkhinvali are still de facto occupied by Russia, and the creeping annexation of these regions continues. Fences are being erected, agreements are being drafted and signed with the Georgian regions aimed at further integrating them into Russia's economic, social and military life. The Russian Federation misuses the principle of self-determination to continue its occupation and deny its direct involvement as a country that has control over de facto authorities in Georgian regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The problem is that we don't have a possibility to ensure international monitoring of the situation, and these developments are very disturbing. We have EU monitoring mission, and this mission is mandated to access to the whole territory of Georgia, including its occupied regions. Therefore, we once again urge for access to the occupied regions of EU monitoring mission, as well as for human rights monitoring mechanism, humanitarian and other civil society organizations. Conflict in Georgia should be high on the agenda of international fora. International community should support all the efforts to pursue a peaceful resolution of a conflict and the restoration of Georgia's territorial integrity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kashunas. Meneer Steven Van Akkelen, België.
Thank you, President. I want to use my less than 3 minutes to first and foremost pay tribute to the Finnish delegation, because they organized a very interesting side event on the problem of fake news and misinformation. And I will come to my point immediately. Our resolution focuses rightly on the role of OSCE national parliaments, and there is an area where national parliaments can play a crucial role, and this is in the long and sustained fight against the poisoning of the hearts and minds of the national audiences through fake news, through propaganda and misinformation. Our resolution, for which I want to congratulate the rapporteur, recognizes in its very last paragraph the importance of mediation and dialogue. But it is clear that national democracies will have a very hard job to invest in honest dialogue if their public opinions, if their audiences first are incinerated by propaganda and misinformation. In all fairness, I did not lodge an amendment to add this element to the resolution, and I simply wanted to mention it. Tomorrow I will have a chance to speak about the amendment that I did lodge, but I think, at least as far as mentioning the problem is concerned, we need to keep this in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now the floor is to Господин Vladimir Jabarov, Russian Federation.
Спасибо. Уважаемые коллеги, ни для кого не секрет, что после окончания Холодной войны мир стал экономически и политически многополярным. Усиливается опасная неопределенность в отношениях между государствами и их объединениями. Испытаниям подвергается международное право. Множатся региональные конфликты. Государства вынуждены противостоять транснациональным угрозам, многие из которых стали результатом западных интервенций. Гигантские пространства на периферии ОБСЕ лишены всякой государственности и превратились в территории, где хозяйничают различного рода террористические группировки. Все это требует консолидации усилий на подлинно коллективной основе. Россия много раз предлагала договориться о правилах игры и совместно бороться с общими угрозами. 10 лет назад мы выдвинули идею договора о европейской безопасности, но она была оставлена без внимания. Когда же мы начали восстанавливать свои позиции, то на Западе вместо равноправного диалога прибегли к апробированной тактике вмешательства во внутренние дела, санкций и военного сдерживания. Сегодня странам НАТО и Евросоюза надо ответить самим себе на вопрос, какой они видят архитектуру безопасности. Разделенные в противостоянии с Россией или объединенные в совместной работе с ней по общим угрозам. К сожалению, пока многосторонние форматы используются не для восстановления доверия, а для давления на Россию, в том числе путем ограничения диалога. Односторонние санкции, демонизация, навязывание образа врага еще более углубляют конфронтацию. Внедренные в общественное сознание с помощью беспрецедентной пропагандистской кампании враждебный образ России на самом деле не имеет ничего общего с реальным положением в нашей стране, ни с ее усилиями на международной арене. Мы поддерживаем любые попытки вернуться к нормальному деполитизированному разговору по вопросам безопасности, в том числе в рамках структурированного диалога в ОБСЕ. Надо восстанавливать сотрудничество по всему комплексу новых угроз и вызовов. В последние 2 года Европу и Северную Америку захлестнула волна терактов. Мы не забудем трагедии в Ницце, Лондоне, Берлине, Брюсселе. Все больше терактов совершается лицами, вернувшимися из зон конфликтов, а также одиночками, попавшими под влияние террористической пропаганды. Это говорит о том, что на первое место выходит задача борьбы с идеологией террора и феноменом иностранных террористов-боевиков. Необходимо в полной мере использовать платформу безопасности, основанной на сотрудничестве ОБСЕ, для налаживания диалога между всеми организациями, действующими на пространстве организации. Кстати говоря, эта инициатива была выдана Евросоюзом еще в 1999 году. Важно продолжать добиваться сопряженности интеграционных процессов в наших общих интересах, и ОБСЕ может сыграть в этом свою важную роль. Спасибо.
Merci, Monsieur Jabarov. La parole à Monsieur Azai Gouliev de l'Azerbaïdjan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank distinguished rapporteur for his report and the resolution. I do find it very much comprehensive, and I think that, in fact, the report covers serious issues of implementation of OSCE commitments in political military dimension. The OSCE lives through a difficult crisis of trust and confidence. At this critical juncture, dialogue on implementation of arms control and confidence and security building measures is timely and needed. Our dialogue is not an end itself, but should serve to identifying and addressing the root causes of current situation. Discussion on arms control and confidence and security building measures need to be seen in the context of broader political military environment marked with conflicts and crises among participating states. One thing is clear. Lack of trust and confidence is not because of absence of relevant measures and instruments. The core problem is deliberate disregard for respecting the foundational principles and norms of cooperative and responsible behavior reflected in the Code of the Conduct, Vienna document, and the other OSCE instruments. Respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, host nation consent regarding the stationing of armed forces remain violated for more than 2 decades. These violations lie at the core of current crisis. Armenia and Azerbaijan conflicts serve as a vivid example in this regard. Illegal military presence, military build-up, and activities such as military exercises by Armenia in the occupied territories of Azerbaijan undermines the integrity of the existing regimes. Armenia conceals its military potential and activities in these territories from control and verification mechanisms. According to different estimates, Armenia maintains 45,000 strong military personnel and large amount of weapons and equipment of different sizes. Such an illegal militarization is a serious source of tension and instability in our region. I recommend recent efforts within the OSCE, in particular the structured dialogue to address risks and challenges to security. I call on the Assembly to be better integrated into this important process and make its own contribution. But the role of parliamentarians starts at home. And I strongly encourage my fellow colleagues to do more in persuading their respective executives to act in strict adherence to the letter and spirit of the Helsinki Final Act. This is a small yet very important step that we all should make to establish peace and security in our shared region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guliev. And now it's time for Mr. Dean Allison from Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I want to also, on behalf of the Canadian delegation, thank the rapporteur for his hard work in drafting this report. It addresses the all too important matter we could do as parliamentarians to ensure our respective countries uphold OSCE values and deliver on their commitments. We certainly have our work cut out for us. Today, it seems that the OSCE security framework is threatened on every front. Unresolved conflicts continue to stand in the way of lasting regional stability. Criminal elements, including terrorists, enjoy the benefits of a thriving black market in arms and other contraband. And violent extremism and radicalization to terrorism remain potential and persistent threats to each of our member states. In 2014, the attacks in Canada were stark reminders that Canada is not immune from terrorism. Such incidents are ultimately attacks against the core values of our societies and the principles contained in the Helsinki Final Act. As the rapporteur report underscores, OSCE participating states must cooperate at all levels to address the threat of terrorism, including by working with national authorities and supporting relevant international and regional organizations. Canada's Parliament recently enacted legislation to better respond to the evolving threats of terrorism. For the first time in Canada, the advocacy and promotion of terrorism offences have been criminalized. We also created criminal offences for attempting to leave Canada to participate in an activity of a terrorist group. These provisions aim to better respond to the threat proposed by radical extremism, recruitment, and foreign fighters, which pose serious threats to the comprehensive security across the OSCE region. The OSCE participating states have committed to enhancing civilian control and oversight of our respective security intelligence agencies. For its part, Canada has embraced these aspects of its OSCE commitments, having already created a National Security and Intelligence Committee of parliamentarians to review and report on agency activities. Canada has thus made every effort to position its security sector to address current and emerging threats while ensuring alignment with OSCE principles and commitments. As parliamentarians, it is our responsibility to ensure that counterterrorism measures effectively protect our constituents and that they operate in accordance with the rule of law as embodied in the OSCE commitments and the United Nations conventions. Robust and informed parliamentary debate is one of the best tools we have to fulfill this important role. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to urge my fellow delegates to consider the report's conclusions and support its recommendations. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. And now it's the turn of Lord Peter Bowness, United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I thank the rapporteur for his report. In the report and the resolutions, we call on the national parliaments to undertake certain activities. But I think before we do that, we need to recognise that in many cases knowledge of the work of the OSCE in many national parliaments is not at a very high level. And we therefore, as representatives at this Parliamentary Assembly, need to ensure that our own national parliaments are aware of the work of OSCE and obtain recognition of that work. Without that recognition, efforts to press governments for increased support for OSCE, where increased activity on the ground justifies it, will fail. People will not vote for things they don't know about. Secondly, Mr. President, there is a reference to the engagement of the OSCE in Western Balkans. But there is a case, I would submit, for increased activity to counter the nationalism and the ethnic religious tensions which we see, unfortunately, in some of the states. This is a matter which the Special Representative Roberto Battelli has often drawn attention to in meetings of our Assembly. Mr. President, positive intervention aimed at prevention is required. The OSCE and this Parliamentary Assembly has really to anticipate and not merely react. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Lord Bowness. We go continue with Mrs. Hermine Nagdalian, Armenia.
Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, we want to thank the distinguished rapporteur, Mr. Vigenin, for his valuable work and comprehensive report. We truly appreciate the huge work you have done. I just want to comment on some points of the report. We share the concern of the rapporteur about numerous violations of ceasefire regime established by the trilateral agreement between Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan in 1994. In this regard, Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh continue to support implementation of agreements reached in Vienna, St. Petersburg and Geneva summits on expansion of capacities of the personal representative of the chairperson in office and establishment of an investigative mechanism into ceasefire violations. The only obstacle for practical implementation of these agreements is the destructive position of Azerbaijan, which refuses to honor its own commitments. We highly appreciate the rapporteur's call to return to the negotiation table by all parties to avoid further military confrontation and the escalation of the situation. In case of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, the international community has recognized principle of equal rights and self-determination of people as one of the principles of the conflict resolution. Therefore, authorities of Nagorno-Karabakh should be fully involved in negotiations. We are glad that the issue of the OSCE commitments in the political military sphere was addressed in detail in the report. At the same time, I would like to express our concern of non-compliance of some states with the conventional arms control regime, which heavily undermines the whole architecture of CFE Treaty, Vienna document, and OSCE confidence and security building measures. I want to stress the non-notification of large-scale military exercises by Azerbaijan in vicinity of our borders, which poses a serious security threat. Yesterday, Azerbaijan finished conduct of another such exercise with participation of 20,000 military personnel and up to 350 pieces of offensive heavy weaponry. In addition to that, heavy military buildup by Azerbaijan and historical claims to the territory of Armenia are manifestations of its military posture against Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan's violation of its commitments under the pretext of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict are unacceptable. One recent development is attempt of Azerbaijan to enhance the area of tension through fortification of its position in Nakhichevan and organized military provocation on that section of the state border. We took note that there is no reference of the personal representative of the chairperson in office as the only international presence on the ground in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict zone and its key role in reducing tensions along the line of contact between Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan and Armenia-Azerbaijan state border, particularly through conduct of monitoring exercises.
Thank you. We give now the floor to Mrs. Tetiana and first of all, Mr. Valery Voronetsky from Belarus. Thank you.
Спасибо, уважаемый господин председатель. Уважаемые коллеги, как сегодня уже отмечалось на открытии сессии, важнейшим отличием нынешней ситуации в регионе ОБСЕ является ее непредсказуемость. Мы являемся свидетелями продолжающейся эрозии, а вернее сказать, кризиса системы европейской безопасности, сформированной после Второй мировой войны. Происходит рост поляризации, разрушение доверия, множатся вызовы и угрозы. Выступая на ежегодной сессии парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ в прошлом году в Минске, президент Беларуси выдвинул инициативу запуска нового масштабного международного диалога по вопросам безопасности, аналогичного Хельсинскому. Такой диалог должен быть направлен на преодоление существующих противоречий в взаимоотношении государств на общем пространстве Евроатлантики и Евроазии. Не имеет значения, как он будет называться, новый Хельсинский процесс, Хельсинки-2 или как-то еще. Важно, чтобы такой диалог начался, и его результатом стало реальное укрепление международной безопасности. Речь идет о том, чтобы определить общие, устраивающие всех принципы и цели, направленные на укрепление доверия по, как минимум, политической и военных сферах. В их числе может быть объединение усилий в борьбе с терроризмом, снижение напряженности и предотвращение военной эскалации, координация действий по регулированию миграционных процессов, а также обеспечение кибербезопасности. Важная роль в этом процессе принадлежит парламентариям государств, членов ОБСЕ. В этом контексте мы приветствуем активную деятельность учрежденного в прошлом году в Минске специального комитета по ОБСЕ по противодействию терроризму под руководством господина Варидиса. Поддерживаем продвигаемую им важную резолюцию предотвращения и пресечения терроризма, насильственного экстремизма и радикализации ведущих к терроризму. Глава белорусской делегации выступил ее соавтором. Приветствуем также предпринимаемые в рамках ОБСЕ усилия по сокращению риска возникновения конфликтов в результате использования информационно-коммуникационных технологий. Весомый вклад в эти усилия могут внести и парламентарии. Как известно, эта проблематика обсуждалась и в ходе 26-й ежегодной сессии Парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ в Минске. Надеемся, что принятые там профильные резолюции послужат стимулом для расширения сотрудничества между государствами-участниками в сфере ИКТ. Со своей стороны подтверждаем готовность Беларуси и далее активно работать в рамках ОБСЕ по противодействию транснациональным вызовам и угрозам. И в частности 9-10 октября в Минске пройдет конференция ОБСЕ высокого уровня предотвращения борьбы с терроризмом и цифровую эпоху. Надеемся, что данное мероприятие внесет весомый вклад в глобальные усилия по противодействию угрозам, исходящим от терроризма, в том числе в киберпространстве. Приглашаем всех к участию. Спасибо за внимание.
Merci beaucoup. La parole à Madame Katja Keul, Allemagne.
Ja, vielen Dank. Auch ich möchte mich zunächst für den Bericht und die sehr gute Resolutionsvorlage bedanken, die aus meiner Sicht 3 Dinge zu Recht ins Zentrum rückt. Das ist einmal die vertrauensbildenden Maßnahmen, es ist die nukleare Abrüstung und es ist die Einhaltung des geltenden Rechts, das wir uns selber international gegeben haben. Mit dem letzten Punkt möchte ich anfangen, denn ich glaube, wir werden Frieden und Stabilität im OSZE-Raum nur erreichen, wenn es uns gelingt, unsere zwischenstaatlichen Beziehungen weiter zu verrechtlichen. Im Augenblick sieht es nicht danach aus. Wir erleben immer mehr die Infragestellung von Völkerrecht, von internationalem Recht. Jeder legt es so aus, wie es ihm gerade gefällt und rügt die Verstöße der anderen Seite. So wird es nicht funktionieren. Das heißt, wir müssen uns alle auch wieder daran erinnern, dass das Völkerrecht davon lebt, dass wir es alle gleichermaßen akzeptieren und ihm zur Durchsetzung verhelfen. Der zweite Punkt, der auch angesprochen ist und der mir auch Sorge macht, ist die Blockade unserer Abrüstungsverträge, die ja nun auch gerade in der Geschichte der OSZE eine große Rolle gespielt haben. Bei der konventionellen Rüstungskontrolle hatten wir zuletzt noch einen Vertrag, der immer noch gut funktioniert hat. Das war der Vertrag über Open Skies. Deutschland hat sich hier auch gerade für die Anschaffung eines neuen entsprechenden Flugzeuges eingesetzt. Und nun müssen wir feststellen, dass ausgerechnet dieser wertvolle Beitrag, diese vertrauensbildende Maßnahme in Gefahr ist. Dieses Jahr konnte noch kein Flugplan vereinbart werden. Und ich plädiere an unsere Kolleginnen und Kollegen auf der russischen und der georgischen Seite, doch sich dafür einzusetzen, dass ihre Konflikte nicht dazu missbraucht werden, einen Flugplan für Open Skies zu verhindern. Denn damit werden wir kein Problem lösen. Im Gegenteil, wenn wir auch dieses Vertragswerk scheitern lassen, wird die Situation noch schwieriger werden. Wir werden dazu ja auch einen Ergänzungsantrag behandeln, für den ich jetzt schon sehr plädieren möchte. Mein letzter Punkt ist die nukleare Abrüstung. Zu Recht begrüßt der Resolutionsentwurf den Atomwaffenverbotsvertrag. Wir haben hier im Bundestag 2010 einstimmig auch den Abzug der verbliebenen Atomwaffen aus Deutschland gefordert. Seitdem ist viel Zeit vergangen und einige meinen nun, dass aufgrund der veränderten Sicherheitslage dies nicht mehr aktuell sei. Ich teile das nicht. Ich glaube, gerade in Zeiten verschärfter Konflikte ist es gerade wichtig, dass wir uns über nukleare Abrüstung verstärkt Gedanken machen. Denn wenn irgendwas hilft in Situationen, dann sind es vertrauensbildende Maßnahmen wie beispielsweise Open Sky. Atomare Aufrüstung und die Modernisierung der Atomwaffen wird keinen Beitrag zur Lösung unserer Konflikte bieten können. In diesem Sinne, vielen Dank.
Auch Ihnen. Und wir geben jetzt das Wort an Frau Tetjana Ostrikova, Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. First, I would like to support the interventions made by my parliamentary colleagues from the US and Sweden on the issue of Russia's violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. We should move apart from further using the term crisis in and around Ukraine in the documents adopted by the OCPA. There is no need to prove that it is the armed conflict between two parties. Russia as an instigator and aggressor, and Ukraine as a victim of the aggression. Several regions of Ukraine continue to be occupied by the Russian Federation, either directly as in Crimea or through the Russian occupation administration as in Donbas. It is a conflict, not a crisis. On behalf of the delegation of Ukraine, we would like to thank the rapporteur for devoting due attention in the report to the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war and Russian occupation of our territories and their severe consequences for the population of Ukraine. The hostilities in the Donbas region of Ukraine continue. The Russian troops and weapons remain in large numbers on the Ukrainian territory and are used to inflict death and sufferings on the Ukrainians. In this connection, it is critically important that our Parliamentary Assembly places its specific focus on the issue of establishing control on the Ukrainian-Russian state border, which is not currently controlled by the Ukrainian authorities. The agreement on permanent OSCE monitoring has not been implemented because Russia rejects the respective provisions of the Minsk Protocol. This segment of the border is the source that continuously fuels the conflict, and this must stop. This measure of introduction of international control at the border would be of critical significance to prevent emergence of another protracted conflict. A path to de-escalation is inextricably linked to stopping supplies of military personnel, weapons and ammunition from Russia to Donbas and establishment of permanent OSCE monitoring along the uncontrolled sections of the Ukrainian-Russian border. Thank you.
Mr. Elshad Hazanov from Azerbaijan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Vigenin for his comprehensive report. Given statement of Armenian colleague and allegation made with regards to militarization of Azerbaijan, I would like to offer a few comments. Internationally recognized criteria for militarization for all countries is the share of military expenditure of any given state in its overall GDP. According to statistics of the World Bank, this figure in Armenia and Azerbaijan is 4.1 and 3.6% respectively. According to estimates of many well-known independent institutions, Armenia is the most militarized nation in Europe and ranks the third in the world. These figures demonstrate the gravity of the unresolved Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict in terms of regional development and well-being of people. It shows the heavy burden of the conflict on the economically scarce resources of Armenia that could have been spent for other purposes, such as education, healthcare, and social protection. In this regard, I would like once again highlight the importance of earliest resolution of the conflict in accordance with the norms and principles of international law and relevant resolution of United Nations Security Council. Sustainably solution to the conflict will open new opportunities for full-fledged regional cooperation and will relieve the countries and their people from its heavy economic and social burden. It is within this understanding that I reiterate the needs for substantive negotiation for the earliest resolution of the conflict. As parliamentarians, we should strive for presenting vision for future rather than repeating protracted allegations and accusation against each other. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you. Now the floor to Mr. Nikolai Rizak, Russian Federation.
Уважаемый председатель, уважаемые участники высокого собрания, мы, конечно, не можем принять данный проект резолюции, так как он излишне политизирован и содержит ряд неприемлемых для нас положений. Я хочу сказать, что если мы не будем учитывать уроки прошлого, мы никогда не сможем договориться о настоящем. Я напомню хотя бы некоторые моменты. Кто был инициатором проведения совещания в Хельсинки? Кто способствовал воссоединению двух Германий? Кто, когда человечество переживало от угрозы распространения черной карты ИГИЛ, нанес поражение ИГИЛ? И я должен доложить, что позавчера последние группировки, которые ориентировались на юге Сирии, на Ан-Нусра, сложили оружие. Кто этот кто-то? Кто нанес поражение фашизму в Европе? Из чьего благословения неофашизм сейчас набирает силу? Вот эта политика двойных стандартов, она нисколько не меняется. Поэтому я хотел бы заявить, что целый ряд положений, которые сейчас внесены, они практически провоцируют парламентскую ассамблею, и мы таким образом с трудом когда-нибудь преодолеем эти разногласия и добьемся создания действительно надежной системы безопасности в Европе. Вот вчера мы провели заинтересованную встречу с американской стороной. Мы постарались убрать взаимные обиды, чтобы наладить хороший, деловой, заинтересованный диалог. И он состоялся. И я думаю, что по таким мощным принципиальным положением, господин Уикер, мы должны и дальше идти, а не вспоминать какие-то факты малозначительные, которые как раз привносят в дух конфронтации в наши беседы. Ориентироваться на госпожу Судерфельд тоже не надо. Она зачитала. Мы неоднократно приглашали ее на Украину, чтобы она своими глазами посмотрела. А вот эти звуки, штампы, клише, аннексия, захват, они еще долго будут будоражить каждого участника, но к соглашению, к нахождению реальных путей сближения это не приведет. Благодарю вас за внимание.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Karen Bekaryan from Armenia.
Спасибо, господин председатель. И большое спасибо в том числе за очень интересное вступительное слово, которое было очень таким хорошим зарядом для очень интересной дискуссии. Благодарность, естественно, нашим немецким коллегам, немецкой стороне за организацию всего нашего мероприятия. И благодарность нашему основному докладчику, господину Вигенину, потому что мы все прекрасно понимаем, что это довольно-таки сложная работа. Под этим названием, под этой темой, учитывать все в рамках ОБСЕ, его широте, в его пространстве и так далее, имея в виду, что здесь есть очень тонкие вопросы, это действительно нелегкая и иногда неблагодарная работа. Спасибо нашему докладчику. Учитывая нашу основную тему, выполнение обязательств в рамках ОБСЕ, роль парламентов, нам надо задуматься о том, чтобы наша работа не была только в теоретической плоскости или в плоскости просто политических заявлений. А именно была бы какая-то практическая часть. Практический характер имела бы работа, в том числе в вопросах инструментов, может быть новых, может быть обновленных, которые бы нам дали возможность более продуктивно иметь возможность предотвращения превентивных шагов по потенциальным конфликтам. Здесь очень важно иметь в виду вопросы демократии, развития демократических процессов, в том числе в нашем регионе. Мы сегодня стали очевидцами того, что вот именно те фейковые новости, о чем говорится в разных форматах, в разных местах, имело место в этом зале. Мои азербайджанские коллеги сумели фейковые новости попробовать хотя бы донести до аудитории. Живая пропаганда с армянофобией и ксенофобией. Что творится? Почему я это связываю с демократией? Потому что это очень четкая связь. Когда есть ксенофобия и в целях, в ракурсе идет на свою собственную оппозицию, у себя в стране и за границами страны, на все армянство, на уровне самого высокого руководства. Вот это приводит к тому, что мы наблюдаем сегодня в том числе. Риторика воинственная. Все время присутствует угроза силой. И одновременно надо сделать все возможное, чтобы заинтересованные люди не могли получать информацию с первых рук. Поэтому Азербайджан, как страна, постаралась на всех возможных уровнях, чтобы был закрыт офис ОБСЕ в Ереване. До этого он закрылся в Баку, и надо было, чтобы просто эта организация не имела своего представительства, чтобы из первых рук не могла представить какую-либо информацию. А это все говорит о том, что когда власть передается по наследству, и когда вопросы демократии и демократизации ущемлены до такой степени, вопросы потенциальных конфликтов и урегулирования конфликтов становятся намного труднее. Спасибо вам за внимание, и нам надо основываться, думаю, на ценностях и не только на интересах. Если мы это сумеем сделать, очень многое пойдет в другом русле. Спасибо большое.
Merci à vous-même. Last speaker on the list is Mr. Nestor Shufrich from Ukraine.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Хочу поблагодарить докладчика. И, безусловно, тема, которую он поднял, это реализация Минских соглашений, не может сегодня нас, украинцев, не беспокоить. Была определена роль России и ее влияние, да, в общем-то, Россия и не скрывает, что влияет на ситуацию в регионе. Однако Минские соглашения были подписаны не только Украиной, но и представителем ОБСЕ, России, а также представителями Донбасса. При этом хочу отметить, что целый ряд пунктов Минских соглашений должны были быть реализованы в парламенте Украины, а не в Бундестаге, который нас сегодня гостеприимно принимает, не парламентом Франции, не Конгрессом США и даже не Государственной Думой Российской Федерации. В феврале 2015 года, через 10 дней после подписания Минских соглашений, я взял на себя ответственность высказать обеспокоенность, что украинская власть никогда не реализует эти соглашения, что она заведомо обманула своих партнеров. И я скажу вам почему. Первое – это ответственность. Про эти три причины я говорю уже 3,5 года, точнее 3 года 4 месяца. Это ответственность за принятое в июне 2014 года решение выйти из режима перемирия под эгидой ОБСЕ. Госпожа Телявини тогда обеспечила это перемирие, и спасибо ей большое. И погибших на тот момент было 74 человека. Сегодня, после принятия Порошенко решения выйти из режима перемирия в одностороннем порядке, реализовать этот конфликт в военный способ, погибли десятки тысяч людей. Разрушена экономика Украины. И не случайно господин Штайнмайер 1 июля 2014 года призвал Украину вернуться за стол переговоров, что, к сожалению, было проигнорировано. Вторая причина – спекуляция на теме войны. Ведь за этот период люди стали в 6 раз беднее. Только минимальная пенсия стала в 3 раза меньше и сегодня составляет менее 50 евро. А средняя пенсия менее 80 евро. В то время как цена на газ поднялась в 11 раз. Конечно, люди с этим смириться не могут, но власть объясняет, что это из-за войны. А при этом Украина занимает последнее место в Европе по социальным гарантиям и стандартам, но, к сожалению, первое место по вопросам коррупции. И сегодня из военного бюджета, по оценке специалистов, крадется $1,5 миллиарда из 5 миллиардов ассигнований. Конечно же, власть не заинтересована вернуть этот регион, потому что те 3 миллиона человек никогда за нее не проголосуют. Но сегодня есть еще одна, 4-я угроза, о которой уже заговорили все украинские лидеры оппозиции. А именно, есть подозрение, что власть будет провоцировать противостояние на Донбассе с тем, чтобы отсрочить президентские, а возможно и парламентские выборы в 2019 году. Власть сегодня не имеет никакой поддержки и обречена на провал. На этом фоне власть поссорилась со всеми своими соседями. После принятия закона про образование, который рассорил Украину с Венгерской республикой, с румынами, с поляками и словаками, готовится закон о языках, который сегодня противоречит Конституции Украины и лишает права нас, меньшин, использовать свой язык во всех сферах деятельности. В чем суть Минских соглашений? Диалог. Но диалог не только с Россией, но и с украинцами. А те, кто подписали Минские соглашения, поверьте мне, это украинцы, иначе бы резолюцией Совета Безопасности ООН Минские соглашения никогда не были бы ратифицированы. Спасибо за внимание.
Merci, Monsieur Šufrić. Nous avons donc terminé avec la liste des intervenants. J'aimerais donner la parole à notre rapporteur Christian Vigenin pour les réflexions et réponses dont il veut nous faire part au terme de cette discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues, for the substantive and interesting interventions. I will not respond to every one, even if I could, because that was really interesting debate, and all of you raised different aspects and elements, which are some of them reflected in the report, some of them are not. But just few remarks, maybe in order of appearance maybe. First of all, on the situation in Ukraine and how it is reflected in the resolution, I can say that I was trying to be as moderate as possible on that. Of course, our Assembly has its positions on that. We reconfirm that because I've never seen any majority or readiness of the Assembly to reconsider these positions, like it or not. So on the basis of these positions, respectively, we need to see the solutions from now on. Since this is, and it concerns also the other protracted conflicts, what I'm going to say right now, since this is not a resolution on the current events, and it is not so much focused on the situation itself, but about the commitments that have been made by OSCE and the respective participating states. That's why we focus more on that, on the implementation of that. So I would hope to see this approach being confirmed also with the voting that we're going to have on the respective elements. On the cyber defense, it's becoming more and more crucial and important issue for OSCE as well, and for the world respectively. This is an issue that has been discussed in a quite interesting conference in Lisbon organized by the OSCE, and there some ideas have been raised. I'm sure that OSCE should continue to work in more details on that issue. That is only mentioned in our report, but I'm sure that next year and in the years to come we'll have to deal with that more and more. On corruption, I totally agree that corruption is an extremely difficult issue for a number of OSCE member states, and that this is also a security issue, not only internal but also international. And I fully agree that we need to deal with that. Maybe not so much in this report, there are no amendments on that as well, but maybe OSCE should try to focus it a bit more in the Parliamentary Assembly on these issues. In the future, maybe not in this concrete report, but I fully agree with the importance of that thing. There is one thing that is, you may say, it's almost absent from this report, but again, this is a report which focuses its substance on the commitments that have been already taken. So the issue of fake news, disinformation, false propaganda, and so on, it is very, very important. All of our countries suffer. Political debates is being twisted in many countries because of the disinformation and the fake news. And OSCE, Parliamentary Assembly, OSCE itself, should further develop certain if not a legal base, at least clear positions on this issue, and we should further discuss how to counter this issue. By the way, it was also in this discussion in Lisbon that we had the issue of cyber security was to some extent linked also to the fake news and disinformation, because now huge part of this disinformation is being transmitted through the channels of the cyberspace, if I can summarize it like that. And maybe just one response. I'm not sure if I got it right. Mr. Rizak from Russia mentioned that this resolution is politicized, excessively politicized. Well, I can say that my intention was not to do that, and in some elements I I intentionally tried to avoid some wordings that we had until now in our resolutions of the OSCPA, just as because I wanted to focus much more on the commitments that have been already taken and to focus more on the implementation. And definitely I tried not to politicize this report in the sense not to try to reiterate things that have been already said, but to try to bring all sides together in focusing on what we can do together and not to repeat again issues that divide us in this resolution. And I hope that this approach will be recognized also by the Russian delegation, but maybe that was misunderstanding on my side. I'm ready to further discuss that with the delegation and see if there's something we can do on that. Once again, thank you very much for this interesting debate, and I hope that it will enrich also and will be a good basis for our discussion from now on the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. It has been a good discussion, and I thank all participants for taking the floor and respecting the timing, which allows us to have 5 more minutes for coffee now, because I think it's no use to start now considering the 25 amendments. We will do these tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and I remember we have to deal with 25 amendments on the draft resolution, accepting then the resolution, later on proceeding to the 5 supplementary items which have been devoted to this committee. Once again, I remember you the deadline for submitting candidatures and the fact that on Tuesday we will proceed to the election of the officers of this committee. Thank you very much again. The committee meeting is adjourned.